People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off.
This is your captain speaking. If you look out to your left, you'll see a beautiful view of the Grand Canyon.
Told you we could fly!
Oh, the Tom Cruise did it!
Jesus Christ! We're in deep shit! You're not going to like this.
No, I can absolutely guarantee you I'm not gonna.
My home has found us.
Who sent that thing?
My creator.
Of course.
The symbiotes didn't come here by accident. They were running.
From what?
But then a lot of nice things turn bad out there.
What's his name then?
No! No! We have something he needs. As long as Venom lives, everything will end.
What are we doing?
We need a disguise.
Hey, man.
Whoa.
Why'd you keep knocking people out? What is wrong with you?
I'm sorry.
Oh, baby, it's a while.
We've come a long way, you and me. But we are true.
This world can't survive if you stay together.
Oh, baby, it's a while.
But I need him.
You're bad people. Yeah, we are.
Always remember you.
There comes a time in every man's life where you have to make a sacrifice.
Eddie, I'm with you to the end.
Always remember you.
No, this is all the money that we have.
What is this feeling? It's like
This feeling?
It's like all of my problems have gone away. No!
I think you broke my foot.
Eddie, I need more money.
Welcome to the Projection Booth. I'm your host, Mike White. On this special crossover event, I am joined by the Kulturecast, Chris Stachiw.
We are Venom.
I am also joined by Midnight Viewing's Antonio Llapur
How you doing? Thanks for having me.
and Midnight Viewing's Father Malone.
This movie doesn't represent the law of diminishing returns. It represents the law of my increasing rage.
Oh, my.
Get ready to dive into the chaotic and thrilling world of Venom, The Last Dance. In this episode, we unravel the wild journey of Eddie Brock and his iconic symbiote as they face their toughest battles yet. From intense confrontations to unexpected alliances, we'll explore the story's dark twists and the shocking fate that awaits. Join us as we dissect the gripping narrative, mind-blowing visuals, and unforgettable moments that define this epic chapter. Fans, this one's got all the bite. Don't miss it.
Oh,
Chris.
Where the fuck did that come from? Did you have AI write that for you?
Chris, what did you think of Venom 3, aka Venom The Last Dance?
I was disappointed that there wasn't enough Michael Jordan in the movie. Isn't that not what this is? Like the Last Dance reference? There was that Michael Jordan documentary that came out like 2 years ago that was Michael Jordan, The Last Dance. I know what they're getting at with the title of the movie. I found this to be a very oddly homosexual film in a way that the other Venom movies, at least the second and third one were. The first one, not so much, but definitely the second one. The first one was like, hey, we have to have a love interest. And then the last two have been like, the love interest is Venom. That's the point, y'all.
Doesn't the second one have a whole plot about them breaking up?
Yeah, and then this one is the death of the relationship, the sacrifice of one for the other. I think I probably enjoyed it more than at least Father Malone, but he let the cat out of the bag early. I don't know about y'all. I thought it was fun. I actually enjoy these Venom movies a fair amount. I think that Tom Hardy as Venom is a weird choice that works. I think that there's some cheats in this movie that are cheats, and I think we're now seeing the multiverses cheats, and I'm sick and fucking tired of it. Kind of like Venom says in the movie. I'm sick of this multiverses shit. Yeah, me too, dude. Other than that, I thought it was a perfectly fine movie. It is a very weird comic book movie for 2024. But I will say, for as much as Marvel's MCU stuff has been very samey, which it has for quite some time now, at least the Sony stuff, the Sony Spider-Man stuff, as bad as most of it has been, cough Madame Web, cough Morbius, at least they're like entertaining in a very strange way. And I'm not saying they're good, they're just entertaining. And who the fuck is making a comic book movie like this in 2024? Because these have sensibilities of those early 2000s Spider-Man movies or early 2000s superhero movies, like those X-Men movies and the Spider-Man movies and the Fantastic Four movies even. So I think it's a weird movie. Again, I don't know what to make of a movie where they have a dance number with Venom again. So it's not for everybody. I think in a lot of ways it will be yet another weird entry into Sony's Spider-Man, whatever the hell they're doing without Spider-Man. But I thought it was fun within reason. And it's only an hour and a half, which is nice compared to every other MCU thing, which clocks in at 2 hours bare minimum. Because why? I don't know.
And Antonio, how about yourself?
I felt like it was an 80s movie. It had that kind of vibe to it. I think that's what it was, like an 80s buddy movie. They're on the road, or yada, yada, yada. Here's a stupid musical number for no reason. You're running into the lady from the last movie, just randomly playing poker on one of the machines. It was terrible. I ain't gonna lie. It's not a great movie. I haven't liked any of them. But if you separate yourself from it being Venom, I guess it's a pretty entertaining monster comedy. That's how it plays. But, I was 9, 10, 11, whenever, when Venom dropped, right? I remember that first issue that I had with him, and I didn't have that 300-ish, number 300 of Spider-Man, but I had 1 or 2 afterward. Venom kidnapped Mary Jane. And it's the first time I had seen McFarlane draw Spider-Man. And I was blown away from him. I had seen him in other stuff at DC, and he was this arch nemesis. He was this evil kind of character. And even when they storm shadowed him in the 90s there, like when they turned him into a good guy out of nowhere, he still had a redemption arc. He's okay, so I was this awful guy and I'm trying to do better now. Movie Venom, it just is. I don't think Spider-Man 3 is all that great, but I do Topher Grace's Venom. I liked his evil Peter Parker. He was a jerk. There was a reason for that hatred towards him. Obviously, the thing just dropping out of the sky while Peter Parker's riding his moped is ridiculous, but it looked cool. It looked like body horror a little bit. And this movies, they aren't very gross. It's very kind of generic CG. I don't know what null is. They just said, okay, here's this force from another dimension. And is that supposed to cross over with Spider-Man now? And finally, you have the delight of having the guy from Ted Lasso in that movie and use it for 3 minutes. So, yeah, I don't know.
There's a lot of Ted Lasso in this movie, to be fair. Is Juno Temple's also in this?
Juno Temple's in it.
Yeah. That's what they were just like, hey, Ted Lasso's popular. We'll just put like half of the main cast from that show in this movie. All right.
Not going to lie. I did a day of background on it, and I did the scene where they show up in Vegas. I was there, but I'm not in the movie at all. My buddy and Father Malone's pal, Matt Shavrud, is an actor in town. You see him, he walked behind in a 2-shot there. He walks behind Tom Hardy and Reese Ifans, but I like Reese Ifans. I thought he was going to be the lizard. But I guess he wasn't the lizard. He was just some rando. Tom Hardy, but at the point that Chris brought up, Tom Hardy is really good though. Like he makes the movie entertaining. Venom as a creature is entertaining. It's just not the Venom I grew up in a comic book with. But Tom Hardy is just like weird and he's fun. Tom Hardy reminds me of Nicolas Cage, and that anything that they're going to be in, the performance is going to be weird enough that you're going to at least be entertained by it. And go for 90 minutes. That's great too. That's where that 80s movie thing came from too for me.
And Father Malone, how about you, sir?
I'm going to just start with what I liked about the movie. The xenophage, the creatures that are hunting them, when they eat somebody, they like aerosol the blood out of the back of their head. That was awesome. I like seeing Elena Ubach in anything, even as misguided as her character is here in the movie. And I guess that's about it. Tom Hardy, obviously, yes. And the look of Venom himself, like, I just kept wondering why this movie is called Venom, because we don't really get a lot of him. I kept wondering why it wasn't just Venom most of the time and Tom Hardy popping out every once in a while instead of the reverse. There seems to be less and less of Venom in these movies. It's rather unusual. And here, the conceit is that they can't even bond because that attracts the creatures. So they've given themselves this excuse not to fully Venom. I don't know if that's a budget constraint or whatever, but the thing where they have Venom's head talking to him, I think is great. And I know they started that in the previous one, but their friendship is fantastic. But to Antonio's point, this ain't Venom, man. I owned an action figure of Venom that when you pushed a button said, "I want to eat your brie." That's Venom. Also, by the way, part of the retrofitting of Venom in the 1990s was Null, the creator of the symbiotes and the xenophage.
That's way more recent than the 90s. Though that's like in the last 10 years, which is fucking wild that they introduce it here, because so much of what they've done with Venom up until this point has just been 90s stuff. And then they're like, oh, by the way, here is the king of the symbiotes, which is a thing that literally I'm not even joking. I 100%. It was a thing that was in the last 10 years because they did a big Marvel for the entire universe. They did an entire event and it was like Planet Venom or something to that effect. And he was the main villain in that. But to your point, all it does is now Venom's a good guy. In everything, Venom's a good guy. There's no villain Venom anymore in anything, even in the comic books now, because of this character. And now they're doing it in the movies as well.
But he stopped being a villain in the 90s, though. That whole lethal protector thing. Like, I was in high school.
All the symbiotes are good guys, is my point. It's not just Venom. It's now you're seeing the way they've treated it in the comic book is the way they're treating it in the movie, where all the symbiotes are seemingly heroes and the villain is this overarching character. So it's, we just understand that the symbiotes, everybody loves the symbiotes. Duh. Of course we do, but that's that oversaturation thing. They just wanted to have Captain America as Venom and Iron Man as Venom and Hulk as Venom, which happened in the comic book as well, by the way.
That no guy, he just looks like a Japanese video game cutscene. Like a Final Fantasy game or something with that hair and dramatic pauses or anything like that. Like, is that supposed to cross over into Tom Holland's MCU universe or whatever?
No, it's quite clear this entire movie is the setup for a new trilogy of symbiote movies.
With Juno Temple as the lead.
Absolutely. That's all the entire time I was like, this does not feel like the third film in a trilogy. This feels like the prologue for future adventures of the symbiotes in the Sony universe.
Yeah. So what did you think, Mike?
Apparently, I like this movie a lot more than y'all did.
I seem to enjoy it quite a bit. I'm with you.
I went back and rewatched the first two, which I've seen several times. Mostly the first one, I'm not huge on Carnage. My background with Venom is I was there for the Secret Wars, the first one, and the black suit and the Beyonder giving that to him and all these things. And then Spider-Man waking up very tired in the morning, doesn't know what's going on, finding out that the symbiote has life, goes to the Baxter building, gets it removed. Eventually, Venom arrives. But I think I was out of comic books by the time even Carnage showed up. So, yeah, Venom was still a bad guy when I was reading comics, and Carnage was the bad guy coming out of all of that. I really had hoped for more when it came to that Woody Harrelson movie, even though that was absolutely ridiculous, especially that they changed his hair between the first movie and the second movie with that amazing Ronald McDonald wig that he was wearing.
That was my biggest disappointment with that second movie. He didn't look like
Carnage.
I'm just an average guy with a really big dick.
But it's just but Mike brings up an interesting point. Is that he was out of a comics by the time Carnage showed up with stuff. But that's when I was like a high school kid or whatever. And that was a multimedia event. There was no movie, but there was a Maximum Carnage video game. There was a Sega game, and there was a coin op. It ended up when it ended up on the cartoon. It was like this big event. It was a huge thing. And I think you just see all of this Venom stuff and all these symbiotes, and Spider-Man's not there. There's no reference to Spider-Man anywhere. And it just, I don't know, it just takes away from it. It's hard for me to sign up for it without Spider-Man.
That was a really weird thing to have that extra scene at the end of Venom 2 where Eddie suddenly goes into the main MCU universe timeline and sees J. Jonah Jameson, sees Tom Holland as Spider-Man on the TV. And it doesn't make sense unless Eddie Brock is the same Eddie Brock as Topher Grace. It doesn't make sense for him to have been transported to that universe because it's only for people who know the identity of Spider-Man. So him showing up really doesn't make sense. Same thing with Electro. To be a nitpicker, it really should have been Vulture showing up in that universe. But
remember when Vulture showed up at the end of Morbius?
Yes, I sure do.
Did that make any sense? And that was Vulture from the MCU once again.
And he doesn't even know what the hell he's doing there. But yeah, this whole thing. And then I love how they just undo it within the first 5 minutes of Venom 3. Okay. And yeah, to see, who is it? Sammy? No, I can't remember the name of the guy. Angel? The Football is Life guy.
Danny Rojas.
Yes, that was so great to see him show up. And I was super excited. Yeah, but that was funny. And yeah, they set up so many challenges for themselves as far as we can't go back to San Francisco. We can't go to New York. I kept thinking that they were going to finally end up in New York. And yeah, this whole thing of we can't be Venom because these creatures will know that we're around. But we do become Venom just in order to kick the plot into gear. But I don't know. I still like it. It's dumb as donkey dick, as the kids say, but I really like these movies. And I even like the Reese Ifans part, even though, yeah, to your point, Antonio, I thought that he was maybe going to turn into Lizard and then having Chiwetel Ejiofor in here too. I was like, oh, is he a secret wizard here?
It's weird how many people who have been in other MCU things are in this movie. However, I will say at this point, it's a very short list of people that haven't been in the MCU.
30 MCU movies. Like everyone's fucking been in them by now. So of course they're going to start crossing over. And
that's my point.
With Chiwetel Ejiofor, he's playing Rex Strickland, who is like a major character now, or at least for a while. He has bonded with a symbiote and is like an ass kicker. And they just, spoilers everybody, they just fucking waste him at the end of this movie. I was like, why did they even call him Strickland?
Yeah. Yeah, that was odd because even for me, not being part of the comics culture for the last few years, I still knew the name. I was like, oh, Major Strickland. Okay, I know that guy.
I guess I equate the actor crossover to reading John Byrne comics in the 80s when I was a kid, where, you know, he just drew Superman, Mr. Fantastic for everybody. Maybe that's just it. Just, oh, well, they just look alike.
But also, again, like literally at this point, to your point, Father Malone, there's so many MCU movies, it's almost impossible to not have. But the problem is, obviously, now because they've opened up the multiverse box, if Reese Ifans is in the movie, he must be the Lizard or Chiwetel Ejiofor. Like he's fucking Mordo. No, they're just new characters altogether. Because initially, Reese Ifans was going to play Clint Eastwood. And that was the initial rumor, but then it turns out it's just Andy Serkis once again doing the voice of a character.
The name of the planet is killed.
Yeah, no. So it's just Andy Serkis once again doing the voice of a CGI character, just like he did in Star Wars.
It's the new Thanos, everybody. Wait, once he gets out, things are going to be really bad in that Sony universe.
who could have been really bad is the God Killer from Thor: Love and Thunder. Talk about a wasted character. Just completely.
Coincidentally, Clint is his home planet.
Yeah. He really reminds me, those two characters remind me of each other. Maybe it was the black and whiteness of it all or something, but I was like, okay, yeah, another one of these dudes. And yeah, no resolution with him. And I was like, oh, yeah, I don't even know if we're going to make more of these Sony films or if now everything will finally revert over to Disney again. The last Deadpool that we watched was just that big love letter to Fox's attempts with the memories that Eddie has at the end of this film of him and Venom together. I was like, okay, is this our last hurrah for this character before they go over to the Disney side of it?
Fatigue. I think a lot of that responsibility falls on Sony for trying to capitalize on regular Marvel Universe with their crappy version and other attempts they've done, like Bloodshot or whatever it is. I mean, that has a lot to do with it because Marvel's product up until recently has been pretty consistently. Actually, you know what? Marvel's product now is about the same it was 10 years ago. It's just these are new characters. So there's a bit more scrutiny on it. And the funny thing is with the new stuff, I tend to like the stuff that most people don't. I thought She-Hulk was great. I thought Ms. Marvel was great. But I don't like Loki. At the end of the day, it's all up to taste. But I think Sony just with their crappy product.
You know, Antonio, you said this movie reminded you of a movie from the 80s. This reminded me specifically of a canon attempt at making a superhero movie, like circa 1987, the script particularly. Just a random hodgepodge, and let's throw this in, and let's have a dance sequence here, and let's have this scene where Eddie makes a margarita with flipping bottles, and tequila is playing. We'll speed it up action like Benny Hill style. This movie was confusing.
Yeah, it was a hodgepodge. It was like they got the rights to the character, but didn't quite read all the stuff, and they just picked and chose what they thought it was going to be like. Had a real Revenge of Swamp Thing vibe to it, but Revenge of Swamp Thing is damn good, though.
But no, you know what? It reminds me of that Dolph Lundgren Punisher. Okay, he has a Shakespearean friend, and he lives in a sewer. Why? I don't know. Why not? Did you read the comics? No, who cares?
Yeah, but that opening scene of that Dolph Lundgren Punisher is just fantastic. Where he kills all those mobsters in that house. Oh, that's great. And that fight at the end against the Yakuza was pretty good too, man. I'm not going to lie. But they never get the Punisher right anyways, though. So what are you going to do?
Well, that's the question that I have. Speaking of that, so you're both talking about the fact that this is not Venom the way that Venom is in the comic books. This is just me coming at this. That doesn't bother me anymore because I don't really care because it's the movie. And the comic book exists.
A shitty movie, however.
But that's a more subjective thing. I'm more talking to the idea of if this were the MCU and that were the criticism, I would get it because I hold the MCU to a different standard because the MCU is trying to be the film definitive version of the characters the same way the comic book base universe in the comic book is trying to be the through line character of Iron Man as he is and has been since he was introduced, because there is still the original universe of the characters, Ultimate Universe and everything else aside. It doesn't bother me so much anymore. I understand. I get it. But at the same time, if this were the MCU version of Venom and he were this weird ass character, I would agree. I think if the MCU ever does it, which I assume and hope that they do, because this movie makes it pretty clear that this is not going to be the Venom of the MCU, thankfully.
He left some of his black stuff on the bar in the other.
But that's in this universe, it gets left.
Yeah, he left a bit of himself in the last one, too.
At the end of the Spider-Man.
But they didn't show it in this movie.
No, they do, but at the end of the Spider-Man movie.
But I'm wondering if I think they might have retconned that out of the movie.
Nope, I saw it. It's there.
Well, no, I agree. But my point being, I think if there is going to be a Venom in the MCU, they will probably do something more akin to the original run of the character. And I don't think they've done it yet. I think that they will do it at some point. And for me, like I said, I understand the criticisms, though this isn't Venom the way I wanted it to be. But for me, this is more just Tom Hardy being fucking Tom Hardy and being weird. It's, again, the problem with this movie really is that the name of the movie is Venom. That's the real problem.
Here's the thing. I've been very vocal that I love every cinematic version of a character. Just like I love every version of a comic book. Different artists, different writers take the characters in different directions. I have no truck with them not adhering to the comic book. In fact, I think Marvel, the cinematic Marvel, works so well because they don't adhere to the character. They very quickly change anything for their characters, so long as Bucky's like a 12-year-old boy in the comic books. So I think that's what works mainly with that.
You know why I think the Marvel Universe works so well? It's because, Kevin the Master. I don't know if you guys have watched that show, The Franchise on HBO, but it's a behind the scenes backstage of a superhero franchise movie. And the Kevin Feige figure is always looming up somewhere from his assistant. But the cool thing about Kevin Feige is Kevin Feige likes these characters. Kevin Feige likes the comic books. He likes the unit. He likes it. And I think the more successful Marvel movies usually work with people behind them than when they like the characters, I think. And you can see that. People making these Venom movies, it feels like they just don't like them very much and just going to do whatever with it. That's the vibe I get. But you watch an MCU movie, you can tell that at the top, there's a real love for what Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko and Stan Lee created.
I wouldn't be surprised, since we are headed towards a Secret Wars movie, I wouldn't be surprised if they pulled out Venom then. That seems like it'd be a good time to also pay a little homage to the original, as long as they change out Beyonder and that incredible white man perm that he had going on.
I mean, there is a fourth Spider-Man MCU movie coming. They just announced it recently. Who knows if it could be Venom. Again, they haven't said anything other than there will be a fourth Spider-Man movie, which would lead me to believe there'll probably be a fifth and a sixth Spider-Man movie.
Can I take a second though? Tom Holland is so good as Spider-Man.
Yeah.
He is when I was a kid, that's who was in my head floating around is what Tom Holland is doing, man. He's just spectacular. I'm excited to see him to be college Spider-Man now with having all these girl problems and stuff.
We'll finally get a chance maybe to meet Felicia Hardy and some of these other love interests that he is.
I was like, I'm so down on my luck, but look at my parade of really hot girlfriends.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just nervous. What?
Yeah. You pulled Stacy and Mary Jane? How the hell did you do that?
What?
Oh my God. Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. I wonder, have they had a Norman Osborn? They haven't had Norman Osborn.
Harry and Norman are going to be on the freshman year cartoon.
Harry, he was in the third movie. He showed up because that was yet another villain in that
New Goblin.
And then we had that the kid from the Chronicle that looked like he was
Dane DeHaan.
Yeah,
they're black on the cartoon, I think.
Oh, interesting.
Harry, yeah.
I'm writing an angry tweet about that right now. I can't stand African American people being superheroes.
Get the wokeism out of here.
Williams Norman, when I don't exist. When did that universe show? Who knows?
But they haven't introduced those characters yet. And in the Spider-Man video game, they actually take an interesting route, and they actually have Harry Osborn is Venom in the video game.
Well, Venom has been everybody in the comics at this point.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, he's been Flash Thompson. And right now in the comic book, Eddie Brock is Carnage, I believe.
Oh, he's Carnage, not Venom?
Yeah, because Eddie Brock hasn't been Venom for quite some time, I believe.
Forever,
yeah. But
I'm thinking Ned will be Venom. Ned's going to be Venom or Hobgoblin or something like that at some point.
Oh, I actually assume Ned's going to be Hobgoblin.
That would be interesting. Eddie Brock is an interesting character in these movies in that he's not that bright. Going back to even the second Venom movie, when Venom is basically teaching him how to be a reporter and gives him all the clues about where these bodies are buried. He looks at all these obscure drawings that Woody Harrelson is doing, Cletus is doing, and brings those back and draws them all out. And I kind of like that. He's pretty much a fuck up. When it's basically both of them. In the first movie, Venom talks about how he's a loser on his own planet. And I like it's these two losers together and having these delusions of grandeur, these delusions of what's their team up name? Lethal and Lethal Protector. Yeah, just I think that's great. That they are these schlubs, and really everything that can go wrong does go wrong for them. I that quite a bit, and I didn't mind the whole idea of bringing all the symbiotes together and having that big fight at the end. I can see where some people would say that was a ridiculous fight, but I thought it was great. I really like to see all the Venoms, all the symbiotes going at it. I thought that was pretty cool. And it was like a little bit like, oh, I've seen a two-headed symbiote before. Oh, I've seen the one that Juno Temple plays. I think I've seen
Agony
her before. Yeah, I'm just like, oh, these are cool character designs. So that was nice to see them.
And they're pretty true to the comics, too. They're very straight up, pretty much just, I would say, up-converted versions. They don't do much with them, which is nice. If they made some broad sweeping changes and tried to do that Fan-4-stick version where it's going to be more body horror and realistic, I think I might have been checked out from a movie like this, because this movie feels cartoony. It feels like a live action cartoon in a lot of ways. Almost to the point where I wish it had been more, but I feel like then it would just be like a straight comedy and people would probably have checked out even more. But I would almost go as far as to say the tone of these movies is like a comedic superhero movie. They're like straight up comedies almost, right?
This whole movie is about shoes. From the very beginning of the film, he's got the shoes, he loses those, he gets these other shoes, he loses those. Even when he's being pulled out of that Vegas penthouse, he goes, my shoes. And then even when we see, and I can't remember the actress's name, but she's Juno Temple's assistant, Christmas Tree, like the first thing we see her do is come into her office, take off her shoes, put these shoes on the shelf. And there's such a prominent close-up of the shoes. And I think that's supposed to tip us off later when she's wearing these ugly black Crocs coming down into the laboratory. And those are Venom. And so like 5 minutes before that, I leaned over to my wife and I was just like, this whole movie's obsessed with shoes. And then that her shoes were Venom. Yeah, that's just proves my point.
And Eddie took those shoes at the end.
Yeah.
It's very Quentin Tarantino of the movie.
Obsessed with shoes, not with feet.
We get a whole lot of different variations of Venom here. We get the Venom horse and a Venom frog and a Venom fish, and none of them do anything, and they all just hint that could have been an entirely different movie with Venom doing horrible things. During the end credits, they have even further variations. At one point, they show a Venom elephant, and I thought, where was the Venom elephant rampaging through a fucking city? Like, why were we at decommissioned Area 51, this fucking nonsense, with this... It's Chekhov's giant acid bath machine. If you introduce it in the opening, you have to use it in the end, and they sure do. Jesus.
I don't even know why he was aciding whatever he was aciding at the beginning. I was like, what is
It's
this?
a truck.
Okay, sure. I don't know why, but okay.
And if that's the method that they were using to destroy things, then why was it taking as long as it was? It seems like that was one day's work and no more Area 51 when you're using the acid bath.
I feel like a lot of stuff that happened in this movie were a result of studio notes. Well, what's her name? Mrs. Lee, or what is that her name? No.
Mrs. Yeah, I think it is Mrs. Lee.
Yeah. When
Oh,
he
it is
runs
Mrs.
into
Chen.
her,
Sorry.
I feel like this movie needs something fun. And they just, okay, she's in Vegas.
I actually think that's Tom Hardy's contribution to the script myself.
Well, he has story by credits.
And a screenplay by a person who could not make a decent screenplay out of Twilight fan fiction. Because she wrote that 50 Shades of Grey adaptation.
Ooh. Have you read the starting material? Anyone could have done.
You can only go up is my point.
She directed
Pun
it too.
intended, huh?
You can only polish a turd so much.
Yes, boy. Yeah, Father Malone, I think you're really giving 50 Shades of Grey way more credit, because if you've read it, I don't think there's any up you can go from reverse. Speaking of things that are strange, why are the characters from Paul in this movie? Because that's what the Reese Ifans character reminds me of.
Oh, okay.
Because, we're going to go to Area 51 to look for aliens. Like, where is this coming from?
For episode 1, 2, and 3 of this prologue that we just watched.
It's very strange. But how do they factor into any of this?
I'm sure they already have it sorted out.
But no, I'm genuinely asking, in what does any of their characters matter at all?
Rhys Ifans is going to end up being a symbiote host and a bad one. And I don't know. It writes itself.
I guess so. It's just so odd to me that there's this, all of a sudden, there's this like family of the Tobias Funke family band all of a sudden that's just traveling the country because Area 51 is being decommissioned. It's like I expected Seth Green from the X-Files to be with them. Whoa, man. I want to go see the lights.
Again, a studio now?
The summer of 1988, Canon Films presents Venom.
Remember the Whedon Justice League had a very similar thing with that Russian family at the end that the Flash has to say?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Whedon threw that in there just because the notes from the previous movie were like, stop killing everybody.
It reminded me more of like a family that was in Mars Attacks or Independence Day. So to your point from earlier,
Randy Quaid.
Yeah, I don't know if this is necessarily a movie that's stuck in the 80s. I would say probably more like 95, 94, something around there.
I've been saying it for 10 damn years. They probed him sexually. Yeah, there's a little bit of Randy Quaid going on here. It doesn't seem the movie knows what it wants to do. In a lot of ways, it almost feels like vignettes. And again, like such a weird, to me, Antonio and Father Malone, y'all talking about like, this doesn't feel like Venom. I agree. It feels like someone was like, all right, the last two movies, we've established this like weirdo version of Venom. What would be interesting for him to do? Let's make a list of those things. And how can we cobble together a script that gets you from that point to that point? Because we have him riding on a horse. We have him fighting underwater where they're jumping around to the fish and the frogs. And then we have the symbiote fight at the end of the movie. But I am more with you, Mike. Like I enjoyed it because it's just, I don't know. And Mike, this might rankle you a little bit. I go back to the Joker Folie à Deux of it all. I'm more content to watch weird failures of movies at this point than Deadpool Wolverine, which I was like, I will probably never watch again because I've seen so many clips of it on YouTube and everything else now of just everything from that movie over and over again that I'm sick and tired of hearing about it. And I would rather just watch a failure of a movie that is at least fucking bizarre and is bizarre and knows it's bizarre than one of these highly polished MCU movies that, again, Deadpool Wolverine was all about the cameos. Like that's ended up what it was being about. Like the plot of that movie was threadbare. This movie's trying to get to a big symbiote fight at the end of the movie. That's what this movie's trying to get to. And Deadpool Wolverine is trying to get to a scene where there's a bunch of characters walking on screen that you've never seen before or have seen before. And now they're in the MCU. I would rather watch a movie that just fails spectacularly than a movie that feels like, oh, it's this highly polished product that is fine. But at the end of the day, I go back to this problem that I've had with Star Wars and other Marvel stuff. You guys have how much money?
Yeah, can I just, Chris, I'm sorry to jump in, but this movie cost $120 fucking million. So it's actually wildly offensive to me because all of the weird choices they're making all feel like they're fucking marketing choices. It all feels like safe things, like audiences like this will do this, and this is weird, and this is offbeat.
It all does anymore, right? It all does. Even Deadpool Wolverine all feels like safe choices, is my point. Like, all of it's safe choices now, which is a fucking shame.
I think like, Deadpool Wolverine was making better choices than this movie. It was making more outlandish choices. That movie starts with the lead character using the other character's spine and skull to decimate and bludgeon and kill a bunch of characters. This movie would never do that.
And that's the high point of that movie.
You know what? There's a plot going on in that movie, and I liked Wolverine. That was finally good use of the multiverse where we took a Wolverine who was a total fucking failure and at least gave him a bit of redemption by the end. Like, I liked that arc, particularly after the downer of Logan.
For me, I think it's a really entertaining piece of, it's like a really nice one-shot 48-page comic that I would get when I was a kid. It's just, here's this team up and it's going to be a lot of fun. And you're going to have a really good time and you're going to really remember Wolverine's costume at the end.
Probably not for the right reasons.
Well, he's got it's a full comic book accurate Wolverine costume.
Doesn't he?
Yeah, that's about it. That's, I think, the most memorable thing that he's got. But I still think it was fun, but it's not.
I think this movie is as fun as that one, me personally. I don't know, Mike. I think you and I are more on the same page with Venom. Did you enjoy this as much as you enjoyed Deadpool Wolverine?
I think I enjoyed Deadpool Wolverine more, but to your point, I think I would rewatch this one sooner than I would Wolverine, just because once I learned who the cameos were and saw all of those come to life, it's like, okay, there are some good moments to it, but not nearly, for me, as many good moments as this one. I do like the riding of the horse. Of course, it reminds me of the riding of the motorcycle from the first one. I like the symbiote fight. I even like the fight on top of the airplane, which was ridiculous. It is interesting. When I was done watching this movie, the overly loud, drunk asshole behind me goes, "There's probably 5 hours worth of this movie on the cutting room floor. We barely saw any of this." And I'm like, what are you talking about? There's nothing that was left on the cutting room floor with this, other than maybe they made it change because in the trailer, I seem to remember like debris coming down from space. And I guess it's those, what'd you guys call them? Xenophages? Yeah. So I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. But they show that and they show somebody at a telescope looking. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's how they get to Earth. Or maybe this is more symbiotes. I honestly thought it was more symbiotes when I saw the trailer. But okay, there's nothing left on the cutting room floor, dude. Tell me what you think wasn't resolved by this, because other than a little bit more, oh, there's black goo remaining at the end, there's nothing here that suggests there's a longer movie for me. I don't know about you guys.
Maybe some of that comes from the character of Null just feeling, if there is an issue that I really have with this movie, for me, it is that character of Null being introduced, and it's like that feels like the Roman Bridger retcon of this movie, where it's like there's been this whole thing this whole time, and it's Scream 3 makes the joke about the retcon and going back and retconning the first two movies, and that is what this movie does with the Null character. There is a bigger threat, and the symbiotes aren't the bad guys. Like, way to pull a lot of what made the first two movies interesting was that the symbiotes didn't necessarily align on the side of these are like broadly good characters. Yeah. You had Carnage, you had
whoever the Indian guy was in the first one,
Toxin in the last one, who also, that's my other issue with this movie. What a weird usage of that character, given what he is in the comic books, which is talk about a usage of a character that is far from what the character in the comic book is.
Who is
Toxin in the comic book is essentially just he's Venom who's good from the start. It's the same setup of he's a cop, but he's a cop who gets a symbiote.
Detective Mulligan here.
Okay. Thank you for somebody finally fucking explaining what Chris is talking about.
Sorry, I didn't understand what you were asking, Mike. My bad. My bad, because I realized that they never say the name of the character in the movie.
They sure don't. No.
That's the issue. And so same with Agony, the character that Juno Temple ends up, the symbiote that she ends up playing, they never say the character's name in the movie. That's purely from the comic books. That's purely from the separation anxiety storyline.
The annoying thing about adding Null to this is that it seems like every character, every conversation is about Null. It's about a symbiote explaining this horrible threat that we never get to fucking deal with.
That just showed up in this movie. They've known about this whole time. They even mentioned multiple times he's older than the universe itself, and they haven't mentioned him up until this point. That's fucking lazy. That's a hell of a retcon. And like I said, that for me is the biggest failure of this movie, is that the movie isn't just the end of the Venom Eddie Brock storyline. This movie, for me, the biggest failure is that it sets up more movies. Not that I don't want them, but to your point, Father Malone, and to everyone's point, it doesn't feel like a movie that's self-contained. That for me is the biggest failure of the movie, is that it should have just been the Venom story. And to your point before, Father Malone, about Deadpool making broader choices, I actually disagree. I think Deadpool Wolverine would have been a better movie if Wolverine hadn't been in it. because it would have been a weirder movie, because it would have been a Deadpool movie. That would have been great in and of itself. But if it had just been a Deadpool 3, I think it would have been a more interesting movie, and they had to undercut a lot of it for the Wolverine of it all. And I think similarly in this movie, it should have just been a Venom movie with some sort of threat that had been somewhat pre-established. They established it at the end of the last movie. Why wasn't it just the Danny Rojas character as the final villain or something to that effect? Instead, they had to go and rope Andy Serkis into this. That for me is the biggest failure. And to your point, it's like cutaway, like Antonio said, it's a cutaway to something else. Like all of a sudden CGI bullshit. And then we're back to, again, there is CGI bullshit with the Venom character, but all of that with Null is taking place where Vecna is in Stranger Things. It's like this fucking other thing that's all CGI, and you have a person standing on a green screen going, pretend like you're scared or sit in a chair. And I think it hurts the plot of the movie because it should have just been the culmination of the Eddie Venom story, and introducing this new threat that will continue on past this movie is like, why even have Venom die if he's just clearly going to come back? What is this, The Walking Dead all of a sudden?
But I like the point you made about Deadpool Wolverine, though, because instead of getting Deadpool invading the Marvel universe, invading the MCU and barreling his way through Iron Man movies and Captain America movies and Hulk movies and just being a nuisance to all the established characters, now we're just barreling through all these variations of Wolverine. Yeah, you make a very valid point. I can't really disagree with you there.
It's unfortunate. Like, I'm not saying Deadpool Wolverine's a bad movie. It's a good movie for what they made. But it being Deadpool 3, they undercut the movie by it being a Wolverine movie. And same with this movie. I was shocked when that ended up being a thing they revealed in one of the late trailers for this movie, because I was like, holy shit, like, why are they doing this in this movie? This is such a big deal in the comic books. It's like doing Red Skull in the first Captain America movie. What were you thinking?
Right.
Like now it's like, why are you doing this in the third movie when ostensibly it's supposed to be the end of the trilogy, unless you're signaling, which they are, there will be more of these movies.
I've gotten to the point now where I don't trust the mid-credits and end-credits sequences just because so many of them have been ignored over the years. Like, not to say that I'm waiting for Harry Styles to enter the MCU or any of these other bullshit end scenes that they've had over the years, but
speaking of Ted Lasso and Brett Goldstein at the end of fucking Thor Love and
Hercules. But yeah, I agree that was just really poorly done. And you mentioned his face. I didn't see his face. Maybe, yeah, the very end, yes. But otherwise, I'm looking at the guy's hairline and I was just like, what is this guy's problem? Does he emit sound from the center of his forehead? How does this work? But yeah, I agree that was not a wise choice to have that as the big bad. Have somebody else trying to hunt Venom or something. Maybe even the guy from the first movie comes back and does something. And to your point about Deadpool and Wolverine, at least Vanessa shows up for a few minutes. They don't fridge her like they did in the second film, but my God, it was always so amazing to see the caliber of actors in these Venom films. And this one is no exception. I love all of the actors that we've mentioned so far. But even in the previous films, having Michelle Williams as Eddie's girlfriend, it's like, what are you doing here? Why? How are you doing this? You're like Oscar caliber actress. Yeah.
She was She-Venom at one point too.
I agree with you guys. As far as like the end of a trilogy, this is a terrible way to end a trilogy. If you want to end a series of films and set up a bunch of other stuff, Marvel already did that with Captain America Civil War, because that completes his story with Bucky, which is the sort of thrust of that entire series. And it's a completely self-contained story. And at the end of it, the shield is fucking smashed to pieces and there's places to go. There's a million threads that can be drawn from it.
I wonder, though, and here's something that maybe we should ask ourselves in 2024. Do trilogy rules apply anymore? Is that a thing? If we're going to make 3 movies, does that necessarily mean we don't make a 4th? At this day and age, that's what I'm asking. 20, 30 years ago, yeah, Indiana Jones 3, that's it. We got 3 movies, a trilogy of films. Alien had a quadrilogy. But my point being, like, I'm wondering if this is just the way that we think about movies needs to somewhat shift based on the MCU, because of the way the MCU has been doing storytelling, because everything is interconnected. There isn't, at least with the best of the MCU stuff. And look, I'm going to have a hot take here, and I don't really care if people disagree. I think the MCU should have ended at Endgame, because a lot of the stuff since has been, you said diminishing returns, Father Malone.
No, diminishing returns is this movie, buddy, and not the MCU.
But when we have things like the Eternals or Love and Thunder, Quantumania, I know, but I think Quantumania is interesting for how weird it is. But I think for the MCU, like, they haven't really made a case for me why they didn't. Let me put it this way. It's not a hot take. I get it. For me, they haven't made a case as to why they continued past Endgame, because the multiverse stuff has been so muddled and directionless. And because of the Jonathan Majors of it all, unfortunately, they've had to really hardcore pivot on everything. And now we're seeing like, oh, Robert Downey Jr. is Dr. Doom and all that. And that's fine. But for me, the MCU after Endgame has done very little to justify like why they didn't just stop and reset again. I know they wouldn't, because again, that's not something you do in movies as much as comic books.
Saturday Night Live should have ended in 1980. Michael's in the original cast of Saturday Night Dead.
Oh, Lord.
What do you want me to say, man? Like,
no, I get it.
They've had 30 movies, and the last 7 have been bad.
That's almost a third. That's a lot.
And their bad movies are fucking 20 times better than this movie.
I disagree with that one.
I don't know if I agree with that one.
Okay, fine. Put any of the Marvel movies against any of the Sony movies since they've been doing their bullshit. Like,
what's the worst MCU? What's the worst MCU movie by your approximation?
The fucking Love and Thunder movie.
Okay, so first off, I'd like to point out that is a post-Endgame movie.
Yeah, okay.
Right. But I think, what would you... Okay, so let me ask a different question. What's the worst MCU movie per your approximation pre-Endgame?
Dark World.
This movie is worse than Thor Dark World.
This movie is worse than Thor Dark World, yes. Thor Dark World is fucking committed to its story. It might be clumsy. It might be a little bit long-winded and a little bit muddled in its direction at times. But I never felt like, what the fuck is going on here? Why is Eddie Brock standing behind the bar fucking making a tequila with fucking tentacles right now? Well, what's his name? Just stands there going, are you kidding?
That's because, again, I think it goes back to the idea that I'm convinced this entire movie is just what would be funny to see Venom do. That's all this, like I said, it feels like a very vignette sitcom movie.
And I feel about it like I feel like Escape from LA, where they were like, wouldn't it be funny if we degrade Snake Plissken in this way? Let's tie him to a treadmill. Won't that be hilarious? No.
And again, I understand and completely agree with you feeling that way. Again, I think that Mike and I clearly are enjoying that a little bit more, but I can understand, because this movie's not necessarily making itself easy to like, because it is all over the place. It really is. When you have a Venom movie where people are being chewed up and spit out, but at the same time we have Venom joking and laughing, but then biting people's heads off. Like, I don't think these movies have ever really known what they want to be. But I also think that some of that is just the Tom Hardy of it all, because to everyone's point, he's such a specific actor whose presence is so his own thing. I just almost chalk this up to, this is just a Tom Hardy movie too, ultimately. Would these movies be this way if Tom Hardy wasn't Venom? No, I don't think they would. They might be a little bit closer to the way the character was in the comic books. Because even Morbius is closer to the comic book version of Morbius than Venom is to the Venom in the comic books. Even Madame Web, in a lot of ways, is closer than Venom ever gets in the movies to the comic book version.
The movies really only work when Venom's on screen, because the character as the floating head or as the creature fully realized and is funny. It's not my Venom, I guess, the way to put when I grew up in the comic, but the character on screen really works. I almost wish these weren't related to the Spider-Man comics I grew up with.
Yeah.
And I could probably enjoy it more.
You know what this almost feels like? These could have and should have been an adaptation of the Darkness comic book, because that is almost the way that these characters, the Venom character, is treated. Because in those comic books, it's like the Crow, this mobster dies, and then he's brought back to life by this kind of spirit that bonds himself to him. And then he comes back to life and he wanders New York, getting revenge on the people that killed him and his girlfriend. But he has this tendrily spirit that comes out of him that eats people's heads, and he can use it to slash their throats and stuff. There were 2 fantastic Xbox 360 games that you could play that had the darkness. I believe the lead singer of Faith No More actually voiced
I remember that game. I played that game. Yeah, it was a fun game. And the little guys would shoot out and run around.
But that's what this reminds me more of than anything else. And again, that's not Venom. But at the same time, like, if you want to do this, there is already somewhat of a precedent in another comic book for having this, because that's what the externalized head talking to him reminded me of. Because in that comic book, the tendrils come out of him and they talk to him. And they have that same thing here. And it's weird because it's such a specific thing from something else that is ripping off Venom. It's very much just another Venom-esque character. I believe I don't know what imprint that is. It's not DC or Marvel. It might be Dark Horse even, but that's actually more what this reminds me of.
This entire series of movies feels like when they started, they were like, what do fans want from Venom? They want him chomping people's heads off. And then the rest of the movie is crafted to allow that to happen. So it becomes a wacky comedy. Like the scene where he chomps 4 guys' heads off in this movie is precipitated by him and Venom like trying to say we are Venom in unison,
which they did in the first movie with no problem. So it was funny when they did that in the first movie. Yesterday when I was rewatching, I was like, why'd they forget how to do that over the time? Because it's not that much time has passed since the first movie, according to this universe.
The trailer, baby. That's right.
So I've got 2 questions. One is, having not been to Vegas in several years, and hopefully I will see you in a couple weeks here, Father Malone, when I head out there. But do they do fireworks displays and fireworks just showing up out of nowhere like all the time?
On weekends, there are fireworks.
Okay. All right. I was very curious about that.
You know what? This movie, the first movie took place in 2018. I think, is that when it came out?
Mm-hmm.
They say that 2 years have passed.
Right.
There was no Sphere in Las Vegas in 2020.
So they should have painted that out then.
Probably.
And there's it looks like a Ferris wheel there too.
Oh, that was here.
Okay.
Yeah,
I haven't been out there since, I think, 2011. But anyway, the other thing is, do you think that the guy who's sitting next to Tom Hardy when he's pulling the slot machine handle, do you think he's supposed to look like Martin Scorsese at a real quick glance? Because every single time I saw him in the trailer, I was just like, is that supposed to be Martin Scorsese?
I don't know that he was Martin Scorsese necessarily. He reminded me of the guy in Casino, the one that Ginger tries to scam, who is a guy I used to see in casinos all the time. Wow. And if you said anything to him, you said hi, he would always say, thank you, sir, thank you.
Yeah, I can confirm this because I had a similar experience with that guy. He worked in the Forum, I believe, in like a fancy men's suit store.
But was he Jeremy Piven? Yeah, if you guys remember Jeremy Piven's heavily gay-coded character from Rush Hour 2.
That's pretty blatant. Yes.
That's a deep cut. But yeah, that dude's a Vegas local. I guess he was a local actor. That's his claim to fame.
I don't know what the deal with that character in the casino is, but yeah, what a odd choice to have just like this guy. They might as well have had like an Elvis impersonator sitting at a slot machine next to him.
They should have. And by the way, that's another thing that bugs me in movies where characters can move faster than normal human speed and they're operating machines. The machines can't. Like they did this when they introduced Quicksilver in Days of Future Past. Like at one point he's playing Pong and he's playing Pong at like lightning speed, but the machine wouldn't be going at lightning speed. Like the same with the slot machine. Like bang on it all you want. That's just going to fucking tilt the thing and have security throw you out.
Mm-hmm. So the day that I did background on it, I think, or the couple of days I did on it, the dress was pretty flashy. You're in Vegas, but they had a specific call for like drag queens, Elvis guys, jugglers, anything that really stands out, nuns. And if you're watching the movie, you can see them in the background peppered in there, but they had very specific calls for very generic Las Vegas style folks for it.
Jugglers, but not crusty jugglers.
Crusty jugglers.
Rusty jugglers.
Crusty jugglers.
The great are good.
The great are good. That's all I can think of when I think of
But
jugglers.
they were on a very unexciting part of them. And there's like in a parking, like you turn into the parking at the Paris. It wasn't super exciting where they were. So make it entertaining. The craft service was very good, though. Had a nice vegetarian meal.
At least you're well fed.
With it. Yes.
I saw somebody losing their shit online, and I'm so glad somebody screen grabbed this. They were very mad about the poster because the poster is woke, because it says, "Till death do they part."
I
couldn't believe it.
Wokesters.
Yep.
They can't approve of Venom's pronoun usage.
No.
But there's two of them.
Devil woke too. He is Legion.
Yes.
I guess so. Is Two-Face woke? Well, I guess that he's them.
He does
too,
say he
right?
does refer to himself as we.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
God, canceled. I'm just asking questions. Why did they have to change Two-Face? That's the real question that they're asking. Tucker Carlson asked that while he's asking about the brown M&M no longer wearing high heels.
It's the green M&M.
Why is Two-Face different?
I'm just asking questions. God, the wokesters have taken over Venom.
It's the death of Venom, like they say about the death of Star Wars.
Good Lord.
That's a whole thing, man. The whole thing. I just remember nerds would just about who could beat who, and then that was it.
Simpler times, eh?
Yeah. I guess a lightsaber could smash the Captain America shield. It goes through a wall. I don't know. Of course, Naomi Campbell could play Thor, but she can't act and stuff like that. But now it's just crazy. Although I wouldn't mind seeing Naomi Campbell play Thor too.
Until we come back and talk about another new movie, which I don't think we have any picked out yet, and there's nothing really that's exciting me about the rest of the year. We'll have to decide that off air. But until we come back and do that, I want to thank this week's guests and co-hosts here. So, Antonio, when you're not doing this, what are you doing?
I am an indie movie director. My movie Space Detective came out a few years ago. It's a weird psychedelic live action animation hybrid. It's a trip. And I have a few shorts out now. My new show at Living Ben is playing film festivals. And I'm doing the 48-hour film festival next weekend. But you can check us out at swampmediagroup.com and at Swamp Media Group on Instagram.
How about you, Father Malone?
Check me out at weirdingwaymedia.com. My podcast, Midnight Viewing. Twice a week, we do horror anthologies. We do regular anthologies. We do bonus episodes. We do a whole lot. Go check that out. Oh, and check out, I'm a co-host with HP's show, Night Mr. Walters, the Taxi Podcast. Check that one out as well.
And Chris, how about yourself?
I'm just keeping up with all the other audio things that I do over at weirdingwaymedia.com, where this show and all the other things I work on can be found. Been doing the Kulturecast for a decade now. Yep, that's a long time. What about you? Wait.
As for me, everything that I do is available at weirdingwaymedia.com. So if you want to hear me shooting off my mouth over there, please do. Other than the one show that Chris and I do that is only available via our Patreons, which is the Rankin' on Bond podcast. And we recently had Father Malone on there to talk about Live and Let Die.
Live and Let Die.
I was like, that's the wrong song.
Mad to you down when
reggae,
you got
baby.
the job to do, you got to do it well. Yeah, Paul McCartney, he knows his reggae. You got to give the other fella.
Folks, head on over to weirdingwaymedia.com where you can hear all kinds of crazy stuff. Thank you so much for listening to us, and we'll catch you on the flip side.